Cool. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So this session, we're really just going to review the product, which is going to be going through the setup, how it works, the features, what it looks like. So I definitely want to try to, as much as we can, use that raise hand feature, right? So I mean, that's why we want to do the team meeting, so we could have some voice, we could be more interactive than just a traditional live meeting. So as you do that, Nathan, if you could kind of monitor, let me know. We can unmute and take questions as we go throughout the session.
Yeah, sure thing.
Cool. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So for those of you that don't know about Patch My PC, we are a software that allows you to integrate both third-party patching as well as the creation of applications within Configuration Manager as well as Microsoft Intune now. So really what we're going to do is just kind of walk through what that looks like, how our product works, and what the day-to-day would look like for an admin. So to get started, if you're kind of evaluating us for the first time, what we have going on within our lab, just a pretty vanilla config man site, so no updates and no applications, and then kind of same thing going on within Microsoft Intune, right? So we can see that we don't currently have any application repository within here. So we're going to walk through, show you what it would look like to set up our product and how it can save you a ton of time as far as the creation and management of updates and apps. So if this looks interesting, first thing that you're going to want to do is probably go get a full trial. So this is 30 days. It can be extended, like if you need more time. But over here, you can submit the trial and then download the installer. So we have this small utility. It's a couple meg, and it's basically the publisher that's going to facilitate the publishing of both applications and updates to Intune and or Config Manager or both. So if you're in a Config Manager environment, this would be on the software update point. So if you have a remote software update point, you would want to make sure it goes on that top level. So within this lab, things are pretty simple. We're only using one site server, and we have all our site systems on here, including that software update point. Now, if you're using Microsoft Intune only, this could be even a Windows 7 VM, so you could even run on a client if you wanted. As far as setup, pretty basic MSI. The only real option here is if you are a cloud-only environment and you're only using Intune, you can go ahead and check this box that says enable Intune only. So that's going to disable some of the prerequisite checks for WSUS as well as some certificates, for example. So we'll go ahead and run that, and then go ahead and launch our tool. So the idea here is once you go through and configure this, which generally it takes under an hour, everything going forward is going to be completely automated. All the day-to-day stuff that you would perform as an admin would be in the console of either Config Manager or Intune. So first thing that we have going on is if you do plan to use our product for Configuration Manager third-party updates, so let's go ahead and just jump over to that console, come over here. So if you want to come in and start enabling updates that are basically going to sync into our all software updates for third-party apps, there is one prerequisite, which is you need to have a certificate in place to sign your third-party updates. Since these aren't going to be coming from Microsoft Updates, that client needs to have a trusted source where it knows these updates came from you internally. So there's a couple of options for that, and in Config Manager 1806, it actually got quite a bit easier. So what you can do is you can go into your software update point under third-party updates, and you can check this box that you want Configuration Manager to automatically create and deploy that WSUS signing certificate to your client. So what's going to happen when you enable that option? If you go ahead and run a synchronization of your software update point, what we're actually going to see in the WSync Manager log, we'll see this kick in. And we're going to see it says, hey, I don't detect that I have any certificate in place today. So it's actually going to generate that certificate for you. And then as long as you have your client setting enabled to enable third-party updates, it's actually going to deploy that to your clients for you as well. So if you come under your software updates, you can check this option here, enable third-party updates. And what's going to happen now, if we go back into that software update point, we can see that the certificate that's going to be used to sign those third-party updates was automatically generated and is automatically managed by Config Manager. So you don't have to worry about any external admins like GPO admins to have to deploy that. It can all be native for you now. So now that that's created, what we can do, if we go ahead and reopen our tool, we're going to actually detect the certificate that Config Manager created for updates, and we can see that we're now ready to go, and we can start publishing those updates. Okay, so let's jump back over here, and I'll kind of preface with kind of how the tool works. So we have these two tabs here, our updates and Config Manager apps. And the way that this works is the updates are going to correspond to our all software updates, and then our apps is going to correspond to the applications. So we can perform both updates. We can publish third-party updates to Config Manager that would be used to patch existing devices that have older versions to make sure you're compliant. But in addition to that, we can also create applications so that you don't have to manually package them, and we can also keep them up to date. So for example, if you're deploying Google Chrome in a task sequence, you can make sure that that application is maintaining and staying up to date so that you don't have to worry about deploying outdated apps initially. And then kind of the last thing here, we're going to look at our Intune piece. So if we come and kind of look over here, the products that we're going to enable over here in the Intune Apps and Intune Updates, that's going to automatically populate our apps in Intune. And we'll look at what both of these look like. But to get started, let's go ahead and just look at the Updates tab. So the products that we enable here during our synchronization, they're going to sync down and start showing up in Config Manager. Let's come back here. So before I get started, let's say that you really weren't sure which applications that you had in your environment based on our tool. So we have this database query feature. And what this does, this looks at hardware inventory within your environment. And that can be used to kind of evaluate of the products that PatchMyPC has, how many of those do I already have installed within my environment? So you can do things like export this. Maybe you're running a trial and you just want to justify to management like, hey, these are the apps that we could get that we wouldn't have to manually package anymore. It can be great for that type of configuration. In addition to that, we do also have our supported products page. So if you're just kind of interested in like what apps they have, maybe you want to make sure that, you know, some of the major apps that we have are that you have in your environment that we support. So for example, you can come in here, you can see a list, and you can come in and search if you want to. Maybe you have some big ones you want to look at. Maybe you want to see if there's any of the open JDKs, for example. So you can quickly kind of see what we have today. And probably more importantly, if there's an app that you have that we don't support, we do also have a user voice where you can come in here, you can request different applications and features, and you can actually see you know, who else is requesting that, who else is voting on it. And we also have a public roadmap. So as we get this feedback, this is really going to be how we build our product. So for example, you'll be able to see that a lot of the feedback that we've shipped is all based on that customer feedback. So we definitely have that voice where if there's not something that we have today, you're going to have the ability to go and request that. There we go. So the only other thing before we actually start publishing, I'll show you a new feature that we've recently implemented. And that's actually based on one of the user voices that our customers requested. So we often got asked like, hey, I have this list of CVEs. I got this from a Qualys scan or something like that. My security team gave it to me. I want to know of those updates that had these fixes, are they actually available in PatchMyPC? Do they already exist in my environment? So basically we have this option where you can now give us a CSV file, and we'll actually go and scan that, and we're going to tell you whether or not the updates already exist in your environment, whether or not they're available in our catalog but they just haven't been published yet, or whether or not we don't know about them and you would want to make sure you have some other mechanism to patch those. So pretty cool feature. You can also come in and let's say that you had some matching ones, you can actually import them on the fly right there. But just for this demo, we're going to actually run through and we're going to go enable a couple of different updates. So we're going to do Google Chrome, we're going to do Java, and before we go and actually start publishing them, I do want to show you some of the right-click options that we can apply as well, which will allow you to customize the way that updates and applications will publish in your environment. So for example, let's say that you had a product that you knew wouldn't update while it's in use. You would have the ability to automatically close an application so that that process isn't in use. You could also skip it if it's in use. You can do things like delete public desktop shortcuts. We can also turn off the self-updater for products. And you can see that these are all available at the all products level. So let's say that you wanted to apply these settings recursively. You only have to enable this once, and we'll automatically apply it for anything that you enable in the future. And this option is probably one of the more helpful ones. We can actually enable logging for the vendor's installer. So let's say, for example, you had an application or an update that was failing. You could actually get the verbose log from the client rather than getting a generic 1603 exit code, which you would typically see in your deployment status. Okay, so we applied all of those globally. Now, if we wanted to have additional customizations, if we right-click the individual product, we do have some additional customizations that can be applied per product. So, for example, let's say that you wanted to have a post-action script run whenever Google Chrome was updated. What we'll do in this example is we have a PowerShell script that we're going to run after every Chrome install or update, and it's just going to set some registry values that set the home page. So we'll go ahead and browse out and we'll set that and then do OK. If you wanted to, you could also modify command line. So maybe you have a custom property that you want to add to the update. You can do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And then I'm going to jump over to our Config Manager app. So those two products, Chrome and Java, we're going to publish as an update. And let's say that you went through and you enabled a bunch of different products that you wanted to enable as an update. Once you jump over to the Config Manager apps, you can actually duplicate all those products and all those settings that you want to create as a base application that you can install through a task sequence as well. So I'm going to choose that duplicate option, and we can now see that Chrome is enabled as an app, and we can see it has all those same customizations applied. Okay. The only other thing that I missed here are for the applications. The only real thing you have to tell us is where is your SMS provider. So that's going to be how we can go through and connect and create the apps. And then you got to tell us where you want to save the download content for your apps. There's a couple of other options that you may be familiar with. Like, for example, you can choose that you want the apps to be available in a task sequence so that you could add them as an install application step if you wanted. And then probably one of the bigger ones is how do you want to control the application when there's a new update available? So by default, we actually will update existing applications in place. So for example, let's say that version 88 was released of Chrome, and let's say version 89 came out. We could update the existing app so that if it was in any task sequences, you would always be deploying the latest version to any new installations that go out. Now, if you wanted to, if you had more change control and you didn't want to update right away, you could create a new version for each app, and then you would have complete control over how you want those base applications to be installed. So we've got Chrome and we have Java now as an app. Let me go ahead and right-click on 7-zip. And there's a few additional customizations that we can apply for the applications that aren't really specific to updates. So these mainly have to do with Configuration Manager apps. So for example, we could move the application to a custom folder if we wanted. So let's say for 7-zip, we wanted to move that to the 7-zip folder in your console. So we can see that this corresponds to the folders that we have within Configuration Manager apps. So we could set that, and let's say at the global level, we wanted all the applications to go into the root patch my PC folder. So you could be more specific at the application level if you wanted to. And then we'll apply that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and start our synchronization. So we basically have 2 products enabled as an update, and we have 3 products enabled as an app. I'm going to jump over to our sync schedule and click Run Now. So what that's going to do in the background, it's going to start downloading the content for those updates from the vendor, and then it's going to publish them as an update as well as create an application. Now, during this synchronization, if we look at the Alerts tab, we can also see that there's some options for getting alerts whenever there's a new update or a new application that's actually published into your environment in real time. So the sync schedule, this is really going to be where all the automation happens. So once you go through and you enable which products you want, like we did in this demo, you really don't come back into our tool at all. Everything is going to sync every night, and it's going to check whether or not there are any new updates or apps for the products that you enabled. And then it's going to automatically push those into Config Manager or Intune. And really just the day-to-day, maybe you're going to look at the Teams notifications that you get whenever there's something new that happened. So we should see here in a minute we're going to actually start getting some alerts in Microsoft Teams that are showing these updates being published in real time. Let's take a look. Okay. So while we're waiting for those apps and updates to publish to Config Manager, let's go ahead and look at the Intune piece of this. So if I come into Intune, it's really going to be the same concept here. So the only thing we really have to configure is our Intune tenant. So we need to tell it where we want to create Intune apps to. And this is all pretty simple to set up. You just need to create an application app ID and Azure AD that gives us permission to Intune. And that will allow us to create all these apps for you. So over here, it's the same concept. So for example, you could actually use this tool and you could publish both to Config Manager as well as Intune within the same installation. So maybe you're using co-management. So maybe some devices have their workload over in Intune and then some have them in Config Manager. You could actually publish that all from a single installation. So the process is going to be very simple, similar here as well. So for example, let's say that we wanted to enable the same applications that we did in Config Manager. We have that same duplicate option in Intune as well. So if we go look now, we can see that Chrome was enabled as an app in Intune, and it even has the same customizations like that homepage script applied to it as well. We can also do things like manage categories. So maybe you have an Intune category and you wanted to say, hey, this is going to be considered a business application for Google Chrome. You could actually assign categories, and that's going to reflect over in Intune for the categories that we're going to see in this application. So we'll just do Google Chrome, and let's say that you also wanted to automatically create an assignment here. So we could come in and let's say that you wanted to deploy Google Chrome to the all users within Azure. So we could automatically add that deployment. We could choose things like when we want the deadline to be, how we want restarts to behave. Pretty much the goal here is that you could actually come in, you could enable a bunch of different applications, and within a single click in our tool, you could do an assignment to all of those at once. So you could say, I want to deploy all of these to Company Portal, and you would actually be able to do that all, and you wouldn't have to go into Intune manually and create those assignments after the fact. Okay, so we'll do Google Chrome for that. And then we also have an updates feature within Intune as well. So for the updates, I'm just going to enable 7-zip. And we're going to do the 64-bit version. And the way that updates work, we'll look at this when we jump over to the client. But I'm going to go ahead and add an assignment for the update. And I'm going to say I want this to be required for all devices. So the way that the update is going to work is we're actually going to check whether or not an outdated version is applied. So we could have a required deployment, and we could do a broad deployment to look at all devices. And then the logic within our application will determine whether or not the update is actually needed in Intune. So the goal of that was to make it function a lot more like a config manager update, where we can let the applicability rules determine whether or not it's needed. Okay. So I think that's good. So now we have the Intune apps and the Intune updates created. So I'm going to go ahead and run one more synchronization so we can get that going. But if we look back in Microsoft Teams, we can see that for the config manager piece of this, we can see that we had an update published in real time. We can see the release notes of Google Chrome. So maybe you wanted to go and look at what was actually fixed in that update that was just published. Within that Teams alert, you can automatically get notified. We also link you out to the CVE database, where you can get details about if that update had any CVEs. You can actually click each of them as we're publishing these updates to understand maybe you want to have a special deployment with a more aggressive deadline, for example, based on the severity of these updates as they're being published. Same thing here with Java. So, you could look at release notes, get details about that. And then we can also see the applications being created, and they look very similar here as well. Okay. So now in the synchronization, we can see that we're currently uploading the application to Intune. So if we just quickly go back into Intune and refresh our apps, we can actually see that we're in the process of creating that Google Chrome application. So we'll come back to this in a second, and we'll actually see what it looks like. Okay. All right, so back over on the config manager side of things, if I look at my all software updates, we can now see that we have those two third-party updates showing up for Chrome and Java. If we look at that, we can see that we get the same type of scan data that you would see with Microsoft updates as well. So once these get in here and they automatically publish, you're pretty much done with our tool. So at this point, this is just going to run in the background. You're going to get alerts either through Microsoft Teams or through emails whenever anything new comes out. But you really don't have to worry about this anymore. This is just going to sit as a service. It's going to sync based on that schedule. And all the day-to-day work would either be done through Config Manager or through Intune. So within our environment, we can see that we have things like update classifications already defined. So both Chrome and Java were security updates. They both had critical severity levels. So if you wanted to use existing Config Manager features like an automatic deployment rule, and we had this one pre-created, you certainly don't have to auto-deploy these. You could create your groups monthly using searches if you didn't want to automate it fully. But you could automate it. So we're just saying, show me all the third-party updates from Patch My PC, and let's automatically deploy those. If we look at that, we also have all our testing groups phased out through this ADR. So we can see that we have our pilot, broad pilot, and production all going out within a single deployment. So when that ADR triggered, once we published those updates, it automatically created our update group for our third-party updates. And it also automatically downloaded those to a deployment package. So we're going to be making use of all the existing distribution points and systems within your environment to perform the deployment of these patches. There we go. And then let's take a quick look at the apps. So we can see that the applications that we created, they're automatically created here. So if we go look at the properties of those, we can see that we filled out all the details that you would expect to see within Software Center. So things like icons, keywords, descriptions, URLs. And at this point, we're ready to deploy it, and it would be a great experience within Software Center. And then for that 7-zip app, we can also see, since we chose a custom subfolder, we can see that one was even more specific in the customization. Okay. If we wanted to go look at how this was all created, we could go look at the folder that we chose for the application content, and we can see that we automatically handled doing stuff like downloading the binaries for that specific app and automatically setting the command lines to make that deployment silent. And we can even see that post-action PowerShell script is within the content folder for our deployment type. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and right-click and choose to deploy those applications. And it's going to deploy it to all users as available so we can see it in Software Center. Before we jump over to the client, do we have any questions? Anyone want to come off mute to ask anything so far?
Yeah, quite a few questions come through, Justin, but your team has been on top of answering them in chat.
Yeah, they're good. They're good.
Yeah, they are. Harjit did ask, though, if you could demo that Cbe import.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so the way it works is, and this will actually be interesting to look at it again, because we've now published some of those updates for Chrome and Java. So basically what you're going to have a CSV file. So this was actually an example from a customer that requested this CVE feature on our user voice. And they actually sent us the format of how their security team sends them files. I think this was through Qualys or Nexus. Basically, it would have some devices. It would show a list of CVEs that they're affected by. And then we also have a couple of other ones that we just added in here for specific updates. But really, this can be any format for a CSV file. It just has to contain like a CVE list. So what you then do within our CVE, you just click this icon here. You would point to that file and then click Process. What this is going to do is it's going to then evaluate whether or not those updates exist for those specific CVEs. We do also, within the utility here, we have a Cbe link. This one's pretty detailed about how it searches. So this will be a great resource as well. Like if you go open this up, you can click the link. But basically what's going to happen is we have 3 different groups of potential statuses for CVEs. We have an available. So that means that we detected that an update exists with that CVE in our catalog. So it's available within our catalog. We then have a published. that means that it is actually published to your WSUS environment and it's available within your environment as a software update. And then we have an unavailable status, which means we don't know about that CVE either in our catalog or we don't see that it exists in your updates. You can also group by products, so you can see for the published CVEs, what are the actual updates that have been published that affect that, so you can make sure it's deployed, for example. You can also automatically publish any available ones in here as well. So basically just a simple way, if you know a list of CVEs that you want to track, you can have it scan what's in your environment, what's in our catalog, or what we don't know about to have a plan about what you need to do for those vulnerabilities.
Nice. One more question, it looks like it came in. Could you wrap the RUM tool so that you were just, oh, sorry, that was related to a side conversation. There we go. Is it possible to deploy monthly Windows updates with Patch My PC, having worked with PDQ, which automates patching applications?
For Windows updates, you would just use Config Manager. We wouldn't offer any type of integration for Windows updates. Yep. This would just be bringing in the third-party updates into Config Manager so you could deploy them the same way that you would deploy Windows updates within Config Manager or WSUS. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. I think that wraps up what's been asked in chat.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so over on the client side, this is actually a part of our dev group. So you can see this demo one client, we're just switching over. And this is part of our initial pilot group. So we can see the deadline is 1 day out because that's what our deadline was for that collection. But since we allowed the updates to be visible in Software Center, we can actually apply those ahead of time. So for example, let's go ahead and open up Google Chrome. We can see that it's out of date and it's running Google as the home page. So what we're going to notice, since we enabled the customization to change the home page using a post-action script, we're going to automatically update this from 77 to 84. And then we're also going to set the home page using that custom script. And what we should also see is the shortcut's going to automatically get deleted because we enabled the right-click option to delete shortcuts. Now, while this update is installing, if you remember, we also enabled a right-click option to enable the vendor log. So we can actually see that we've created a log for the verbose MSI of Google Chrome. So if it ever did fail, you could actually go look at that vendor's log to see why it failed. Was it not able to update a registry key and things like that? So troubleshooting can be very easy because we do expose that logging for all our products within here. In addition to the vendor's log, we do also have a Patch My PC specific log. And this is in the root of CCM logs, and it also uses a CM trace format. So this will really show you what's happening during the update. So for example, we can see that we ran the Chrome MSI. We automatically added the logging parameter because of that right-click option, and we saved it in the log folder that you defined within the right-click option. So that's where we can see that happening. We can then see that we deleted the public desktop shortcut for Chrome based on the right-click option. We then disabled the self-update feature of Chrome based on that right-click action. We set 3 registry values to do that. And lastly, since we had that post-action script, we automatically ran that script to set the home page. So we can now see that that Google Chrome icon is gone. If we launch Google Chrome, we can see the home page was automatically configured using that post-action script, which allows you to set that. Okay. And then let's go ahead and run Java really quick. So same kind of thing here. I don't remember if we had the auto close option enabled. I don't think I did, but we should have the logging enabled. So what we're actually going to see here is the Java exe installer. We're going to automatically add the command line to put the log file in here, and we should see that show up right here. There we go. So we can actually see the verbose log for Java's exe installer as well. So this will work both for MSIs as well as exe installers that support a logging parameter. You wouldn't have to worry about researching all of that. You would just tell us what folder you want all the logs to go in, and then that would automatically happen for you. Go. There we go, and now that's up to date. So if we refresh now, we should see Chrome was at 77, Java was at update 221. If we refresh, we can see that Java went to 261, and then now we're at 84 for Chrome. So that just happened just like any other Windows updates. And what's great about that is if you're using things like maintenance windows or restart suppressing, all the same deployment options that you would see within your deployments would function the exact same way for third-party updates as they would for Microsoft updates. Last thing here, we can take a look and see that we don't currently have 7-zip installed. So this is the application feature. So even if an app isn't there, you can even do those initial deployments for those applications. And what's cool about this is that the same log file that we would see the updates happen, we would also see the applications happen as well. So here in a second, you'll see that 7-zips installer, you'll see us calling that. And you can also see things like the command lines that we use when we automatically package that. So /s would be an example of 7-zip for that one that happened. Okay. Yep. We also can uninstall apps. So for example, we just installed 7-zip, but let's say that you wanted to remove an application. We also will have the uninstall filled out within the deployment type as well. So you could even remove apps that you don't want installed based on our applications as well. Okay. I do also see that there's some questions about the right-click options coming in. We did recently create a Cbe article. So if you right-click any of the products, we have this new Learn More option. So this will show all of the customizations that can be applied within an application or an update. And it's pretty detailed. So for example, let's say that you wanted to learn about the managed assignments within Intune. You could go and kind of see how all this works as well. So I'll include this article in the chat window as well that describes all of those customizations that can be applied within the apps and updates. Okay, cool. So that really covers the updates and apps piece of Config Manager. But let's look back into Intune where we left off. So if I come back into our Intune Apps, and if I go ahead and refresh, we can see that we've got our application created both for Google Chrome as well as for Java. And then we have our update for 7-zip. So if I come in here and look at that app for Chrome, we can see that we've automatically filled out all of the metadata like you would expect, like we did with Config Manager, things like icons, descriptions, that type of data. And we can see that we also automatically created our assignment. Let's take a look right here to all users. So based on that right-click option, it automatically created the assignment to the all users group within Intune. So if I jump over and look at Intune, this is a device that we have enrolled to Intune. Let's take a look and see if we've got policy yet for those apps. Here we go. There we go. So it looks like we do have policy. So we can see that we have, we don't have Google Chrome installed yet. So let's say that we wanted to install that. Let's go ahead and kick that off. Install. We can also see that we have that custom category that we define in that right click as well for the application. There we go. So we'll let that sit for a minute. Just from the download from Intune might take a minute. While we wait for that to install, we can go ahead and look at some of the reporting options that we have available as well. So let's jump over here. Here we go. So in addition to all the native reports that you have within Config Manager, so let's say that you are looking at your reporting services point, any of the software update compliance reports, they would be able to report compliance on third-party updates as well, because from a Config Manager perspective, they report updates back to the site in the exact same way. So you could use any of the native reports that are available, or if you wanted to, we actually have within our publisher, take a look here. Under the Advanced tab, we do have an option where you can install some Ssrs dashboards into Config Manager. This is actually free regardless of whether or not you're a customer, so you can come in here and install these even if you don't have the tool licensed. So from here, there's a couple of dashboards that you can run, and this is really just a bit more of a graphical view compared to some of the native reports within Config Manager, where maybe you want to send reports to management, stuff like that. This one will be a lot more friendly from a user perspective to see what your compliance looks like. So for example, we'll show you how many workstations, how many servers you have. This was actually a report originally created from a Microsoft engineer. They had a Cbe article about how to create reports. So what we did, we updated it for some newer operating systems like Windows 10 and Server 2019. And then we also created this installer where we're going to automatically change the URL. So once it's installed, all of the sub reports work for you and you don't have to worry about that. So that's why it's totally free, regardless of whether you're a customer. Feel free to go install that. But this will show you things like compliance, like how, for updates released in December, what's your compliance look like? And you can click into any of these graphs, and then it would show you updates released in that month. So by default, we'll show you both third-party updates as well as Microsoft updates. If you wanted to, there's a dashboard that will only show third-party updates, maybe if you only wanted to see your compliance for those. And then there's just a variety of various charts and graphs to really get details about what does your overall patching look like. Go. Here's the one where if you only wanted to see third-party updates, you could run this one. This one will show both third-party and Microsoft updates. And then if you wanted to limit the dashboard to a specific software update group, you could choose a specific group that you want, and you could even say, only show me security updates, for example. And then this one would limit you down based on that if you wanted to be more specific. Okay. But in addition to all of the reports that we offer via SSRS, we can also run any of the native community reports that you may be accustomed to. So for example, this is the free Power BI report available from Microsoft, from the product group. So over in the update compliance, any of the third-party updates will also show up in any of these reports. So whether it's like an SC Config Manager Power BI dashboard, whether it's any in-house reports that you've created, anything that you publish from our tool into the updates feature, you're going to be able to report that exact same way. And that also includes just, if it were going into the console and saying, hey, what does my device compliance look like? You could look at that right here as well to see kind of where you're at for those deployments. Okay. And then the only other thing for Intune, so Intune's a little bit more tricky because there's not really a way to report natively on compliance within Intune directly from the console. So for example, if you wanted to look at compliance, you would have to go into each individual application or update, and you would have to view that. So what we do, we actually have a Power BI dashboard that you can run. So the way that it works, go ahead and open up our tool. If we look at our Intune options, you can run the Intune Manager utility. So what this will do, this is going to automatically query Microsoft Graph, and it's going to pull out the compliance statistics for both our applications as well as our updates, and we're going to pull all of that data back down. And then what you do, you just export that to a CSV file. And then we have a Power BI dashboard that you can download from our website. Let me pull that up. And then you can actually see in bulk all of the applications that you have assigned, how many you don't have assigned, and how many of them are installed or required. We also have applications and updates for that as well. So you can see kind of compliance statistics for both of those for all your devices based on that dashboard. So just kind of a way for us to help reduce the gap in reporting for those customers who may be Intune only and they don't have the full reports that you would get within Config Manager. Okay. All right, so let's take a look here. So we were currently on 7-zip version 18. Let's just see if that patch has applied yet. Looks like it hasn't quite come down, but we can now see that Chrome is installed. Let's take a look. There we go. So we can see that Chrome was installed, and we can also see the home page was set here as well. So the good thing is all those same logs that we got within Config Manager, we also get all of those same verbose logs within Intune as well. So for example, if you wanted to see that application that was getting assigned, you would be able to see all that information within our client here as well. There we go. Yep, so that looks good. Let me just log out really quick. So sometimes the Intune policy can be a little bit slow. So I'm just curious if we log back in to force it, whether or not we see that update show up here in a second. Okay. All right, so we'll give that a minute to run, but let's go ahead and take questions while we're waiting to see if we can get the third-party update to apply through Intune. Just pull that in. Just looking through the comments. Does anybody want to come off mute that may have a question right now?
If you would like to come off mute and ask a question, please go ahead and raise your hand so that we as moderators can unmute you.
Okay, so where's the Power BI Intune dashboard? So if you go to our website, I'm sure one of the team members will have the link in a second, but if you do Power BI Intune, that will probably bring it up. Yeah, here we go. I'll include this link. So this is where you can download it. It's just the Power BI template file at the bottom right here. And then it will just prompt you for the CSV file once you set it up. And that's going to be how it loads the data for what's compliant and what's not. Yeah, so if you're using Windows Update for Business instead of Config Manager, you would use the Intune feature for the apps and the update. So let's just take a look and see if the update has applied yet. There we go. So I don't know if you guys noticed that. So we went from 7-zip version 18 to version 19. So if we come back and look at our Intune logs, within our log here, we can see that we detected the old version of 7-zip was installed. And then we can see that it applied the update. So within our detection script, what we'll actually see here is that if you deploy one of our updates as required, we're going to go out and we're going to scan your machine, and we're going to see whether or not there are any old versions applied. And let me just jump back to that because I don't think I really defined that very well. Let me include this document. There we go. I'm including this link here as well. But so the big thing here is that when we look at our tool, the way that this Intune updates feature is different from our Intune apps. So let's just go ahead and look at our Intune apps. So anyone that's an update is going to have this update for, and then anyone that's an app, you're just going to see the normal application. So the applications are designed to deploy the application even when it doesn't exist in your environment. The way that the updates work, so this was a feature that we released probably about 2 or 3 months ago, is there's still an application because we didn't have any mechanism like we do with WSUS and the Windows Update agent where we could create detection, where we could create updates for third-party apps. So what we did is we created an application, but the way that the update works is that we have requirements created, which is basically the logic where we can determine whether or not there's a previous version. So in our case, when we looked at our Intune client, we went through and we scanned this device and we said, hey, we detect that version 18 is there and this update is version 19 and it needs to be applied. So when we jump back into Intune, when you actually go through and you look at these assignments, you can see that the only assignment that you can create is required. Where if we look at the applications, you could create both required and available. So the goal is that with our updates, you would deploy that as required, and you could say deploy to all devices, and you could let the application version of that update handle whether or not there's a new application that needs to apply an update. So hopefully that makes sense about the way that the updates work if you're on Intune only, where you could just deploy that to everybody, and if the update's needed, it will automatically apply, very similar to the way that within Config Manager, updates would only apply based on them being required. Okay. Cool. Anyone else want to come off mute and ask anything? Just looking through the questions here. Okay, big thank you to your videos. Thank you. You're welcome.
Constantine, for that policy, for the script question, so the script is part of policy, so it comes down as base64 encoded in the JSON. So technically, yes, it's about 1.5 kilobytes for the detection script and 1.5 kilobytes for the requirement script.
Yeah, and that was
Per app.
that was a fun thing that we detected. Like there are some limits to policy, so we had to optimize the script to be as small as we could to make sure that we could have a broad number of deployments within Intune without hitting those policy limits. So good question there, if that's what you were getting at. Oh, good question. So supersedence. So that's a good one. So supersedence isn't natively available within Intune yet. I know they're working on that. So the way that it works is within our publisher. Come back over here. For Microsoft Intune, we have this option about how do you want to handle new assignments that come out. So for example, when there's a new update available, the way that it works is that we would copy any of the assignments that you created for the previous version, and then we would add those assignments to the new version. So let's say Chrome 85 came out, version 86 then came out. By default, if you leave the default option checked to delete the old assignments and create new ones, it would automatically assign the new version of Chrome, and then it would deassign the old version to make sure that you're only deploying the latest one. So since there's no native supersedence available today, we basically had to engineer our own option about how we wanted to handle the ability to patch when new versions come out. And that's how we came about how to handle updates to existing apps. I'm also going to include a Cbe article from our UI that will specifically describe each of these options a lot more. So this will be the one that you want to check out. And this is what describes how we handle new updates and how we essentially built supersedence for the old ones to deactivate those. Yeah, so script runner for Hodget's question. So script runner is basically it's our implementation of the customization. So whenever you come in here and if you say, let's say for Chrome, let's say that you went in and you said, I want to automatically add a transform file to an MSI, or I want to disable self-updates, or I want to modify the command line with something custom. What happens on the client side is we're going to have a special package that is basically going to control what customizations that you applied. So for example, we can see that this is the PowerShell script that we defined. So what Script Runner does is on the client side, when we detect that we have an update or an application to apply, that's going to be what parses out all of the customizations that you applied, and it's going to be what performs all those actions. So for example, if we go ahead and look at Java, let's take a look. Script Runner would be what automatically runs the post-action PowerShell script. If you added a custom script, it's going to be what performs the action to disable self-updates, such as updating registry values. And it's also going to be what would delete links. And it's also what would call the actual vendor's installer. So we can see, oh, looks like Zoom, it just broke. So you can see it actually running the MSI with all the parameters that you would have defined there as well. So it's basically our way to make all this customization, if you applied any customization, work on the client side. And it's also where you can troubleshoot any installation failures, either for apps or updates, by having it all in a single location. So kind of like a wrapper, but it's using all the native installers that the vendor would have provided. It's just allowing additional flexibility on top of that.
Okay, Nick said I could go when it got quiet.
Cool, yeah.
Hi, Justin.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
This is Kara Hart. I started a new position in October, so I'm not in charge of all the Intune deployment yet, but I'm working on it. Two things. One with supersedence. We wish here that we could delete all but the last one
Okay, yeah.
of superseded updates, because what if we needed to roll back to it? So something to think about.
Delete all but the last one being the latest?
We have a user voice for this for like retain
okay.
N minus. I can
Yeah.
find it so I can link it.
Okay.
It's a good one for sure. It's something we need to do.
Yes.
Because you can decide now whether to delete all the old ones or not delete all the old ones.
So is this specific to like this option here in Intune? Like how many old?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. So we'd love to have one that deleted, so it deletes the previously created applications when an updated one is created. We'd like to delete all but one.
Okay, so you could still revert
in case
back.
we had to roll back. Like, what would we do? And then I also was wondering if you know anything about, I tried to push out both Tableau Desktop and Tableau Reader, and it seems to only see one of them when I do that. And I'm not sure if I made a mistake or if that's a bug. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know. I don't know whether it's a bug or not. So Andrew is our app guru, so I'm pasting his email into the chat.
Great.
Sync up with him so he would be able to look at the detection and what's happening there. We might need the software detection log, but we could definitely take a look. I'm not aware of any issues being tracked around detection of either of those products.
Okay. Is that his correct email address, or should there be a C in there?
There should be a C. Yeah, let me fix that.
Cool.
Patchmypc.com. Yeah, there you go.
Is that for Intune, by the way, or SCCM?
That was Intune.
Intune.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good option. So what we're hoping, so I know product group is working on supersedence. Maybe I'll follow up with David later today after the sessions. It would be probably ideal if we could like maybe tie into whatever that looks like when it comes out. But I'm sure we could look at like an N- to keep at least a couple of revisions around in Intune just in case. Yep. Cool. Other questions? Anyone want to come off mute or paste in the chat window? We're looking at both. I guess from a pricing, while we're waiting for people to raise hands or come off, we can look at that real quick. So we have basically 3 different tiers that most people would use. We have Enterprise. So the way that that works is you would get the updates functionality within Config Manager. So if you only cared about patching existing installation of apps, it would basically give you this tab right here. You could get by with the Enterprise, which is $2 per year per device. Or if you're like a pretty small environment, we do have a minimum price that I want to call out here, which would be the amount that you would pay if your device threshold is lower than that. So just keep that in mind. We then have Microsoft Intune. So if you were cloud only, that would get you the function of the Intune apps and the Intune updates if you only cared about cloud. And then lastly, we have Enterprise Plus. That would give you the functionality of both updates in Config Manager, applications in Config Manager, as well as applications and updates within Intune. And that's the $3.50 per device per year. So from a pricing perspective, that's going to be what that looks like. For the cost of it. We also have this comparison chart that you can click, and that will kind of show you the comparison of feature set for each of those different subscriptions. In addition to that, we do, if you click our live demo, so if this looked interesting and you wanted to have a very similar session to what I did today with additional teammates, you can click the live demo. We're going to have an interactive calendar where you can come in, you can schedule a time that you want to see a demo, kind of like what we did today with your teammates. You can add additional guests from your company, and then it would basically be a walkthrough of us going through the setup just like I did here with an engineer from our team. In addition to that, like if this looked good and you just want to get started, you can go request a free trial using this link, but we do also have an option where you can click this setup call, and this will be another free option even if you're not a customer, where you can come in and you can schedule a call with an engineer from our team. Just choose a date and a time, and we can actually help you install the product in your environment, answer any questions throughout that process, and just make sure that you have a smooth implementation for this. So question about RFPs. So yeah, if you have a request for purchase, you can go ahead and send that to sales@patchmypc.com, and we should be able to fill that out and get you any information that you would need for that. Okay, so volume discounts. We do have volume discounts. So under our FAQ, there should be a section called discounts. I don't know the specifics about like what volume looks like as far as percentages, but if you wanted to see what type of discount you would get, the best option there would just be to click request a quote here on the top. And then you would just choose how many devices that you have and which subscription level you want. So you're going to have to submit a quote for that just so we can see whether or not things like sales tax could be applied depending on states and stuff like that. But that would be the best option for volume discounts. You could actually get a quote and it will split out whether or not there's any volume discounts, nonprofit, education, and stuff like that applied within that quote. Okay. Anybody want to come off mute? I don't think we've had too many questions with voice. Let's get some with maybe some people off mute if you want. Is there anything pending, Cody, Andrew, that we haven't done?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do you see any hands up, Nathan, where we can have someone come off?
I don't see any hands up right now. Everybody's being shy today.
Let's see what we got.
Chat is fine too, but I mean, voice is just so much better.
Come on.
I think Harjeet should have to talk now.
Yeah, come on, Hajit. What do you have? You've got to have something. Cool. Have I missed any points that you guys typically do in our demos? People on our team? Anything I'm missing?
I think sometimes we'll show off the scanning if you didn't.
Oh yeah, I don't think I looked at the Intune scanning. So we do also have a feature here in Intune where you can actually scan your Intune devices. So let me just go ahead and click query. So even if you're cloud only, we can still query like what apps are installed on your devices through Intune and Microsoft Graph. So that's a pretty cool feature. I think I did cover the scanning feature in SCCM here. I didn't cover the options for auto publishing though. So if you wanted to, you can enable the auto publishing of products based on them being installed on a specific number of devices. So for example, we could have this scan automatically run for each synchronization. And let's say that the device count was 10 or more. Let's say that we release a new product. We could automatically enable those for publishing based on them meeting certain thresholds that you define in our scan feature. So that's a way that you can auto-enable even new products so you never have to come back into our tool. You would just have them automatically appear in Config Manager. Yeah, so Teams notifications. So question, could that be daily, weekly, or whatever summary? So the way the Teams notification works over in our alerts, so we can just run a test real quick. So whenever there's a new update or app that's been published, that's going to be when that notification sends. So ultimately, it's going to be based on your synchronization schedule and whenever there's anything new for products that you enabled. So if you were syncing every night, and let's say there was a new version of Chrome or Java based on the products we enabled, you would get alerted when those came out. If you were doing a weekly sync, you would only get a Teams notification for products that get published every week. Or you could even have it run once a month, say on Patch Tuesday, and then the Teams alert would only happen during that Patch Tuesday sync. So the Teams will only happen based on a new update or a new application getting published. All right, I hear you, Hajit. I'll be quiet now. What's your question?
Right. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you, yep.
Okay, so a couple of things. One is when you go back to that Patch My PC portal with the hardware inventory. Okay, so I've seen double entries for each application. Sometimes in when I'm doing my testing and stuff. So, for example, if you choose the 64 and 32 bits and you're deploying both.
Yes. Yeah. So
it gives you the same numbers. So it doesn't differentiate between the two.
Gotcha. Yep. So it should be much better than it used to be. So for example, we made a lot of improvements on the way that we scan the hardware inventory views in Config Manager to try to be more accurate. So for example, we can see 32 and 64-bit show up correctly here. So this user voice we probably shipped maybe like 6 months ago. There are still a couple of apps. Do you want to touch on that, Cody? The scenario where we couldn't differentiate depending on how the app installs.
Yeah. So, like you said, we did our best to at least improve it. The issue comes from the vendor of the products, where they're not making it readily identifiable, whether that's through name or if they commonly will install the application in 32-bit registry hive and folder, and that's how it ends up actually identifying. But we're doing our best to differentiate when we can with our own kind of metadata on the back end. So it's just kind of a best effort on our part. I wouldn't pin this to give you like an identical inventory of the applications in your environment, so much as a starting point to investigate what you might want to consider patching. We do provide that export option, so it is a source of data, but some very granular reporting data. I would say you might want to craft reports so that you've got a good handle on the queries that are in place. So I think we're just trying to present it as a tool for the toolbox.
Yeah, so the big thing is like some vendors will have 64-bit applications installed in the 32-bit registry hive. So there's a couple that do that, and there's no way via a hardware inventory scan that we could differentiate between those two. But it should be much better than it used to, because we used to only scan the add and remove programs view, but we did recently split that off so that it will look at the 32-bit add and remove programs in 64. So probably high 90% of apps should show correctly in this scan. But like Cody said, this is probably more to try to understand what you may want to enable. And then for the most accurate detection, you would want to look at the actual update compliance. That should always be pretty much 100% there. But the scan still should be very accurate based on some of the improvements. And I'll include the link to this user voice for that idea, Ajit. Should be much better.
Okay, and the other thing is about Firefox, which is really a problematic application. So when you're using the MSI, it seems like the 64 and 32-bit have the same MSI code for detection. So those that have the 64 and you're deploying the 32 so that the 32s get updated, it will actually then update the 64, and then you end up with like two versions of Firefox on the systems. I'm not sure if you guys ran into that or had anybody ran into that.
That's interesting. So I know that at least for our catalog, we still use the EXE just because the MSI wasn't always available. I would say shoot Andrew an email. Just because we don't have the MSI in our product, it would be the EXE-based version still. I don't know without doing...
Is there a reason why you're not using the MSIs instead of... Because they are available.
Yeah, they're available. Andrew, do you know... I know we originally started with EXE and it was working pretty well, but I know the MSI had some weird issues. Do you have any more context?
Yes, quote.
They packaged the MSI super weird.
Yeah, that's what I'm noticing too.
Yeah, so that's probably why. Yeah, they don't package it well.
Okay. So
and finally, the other thing I was going to say is that you may want to just touch upon your feedback portal. I don't know I don't think you covered that. So
feedback portal as in the user voice?
Yeah.
So definitely. So like I mentioned, maybe at the beginning, I forget, everything that we do from a product perspective. So let's take a look at the roadmap, for example. That's going to be a key thing to kind of see how we innovate. Anything with this kind of yellowish tag is customer feedback. And that can be submitted at ideas.patchmypc.com. Let me paste that link in. So whenever we're looking at new apps or features to add, it's all going to be based on that customer feedback. So if you wanted to see, for example, things like new products. So for the month of September here, we can see that we added like 6 new products to the catalog based on that customer feedback that we get at ideas.patchmypc.com. You can also kind of see what we're currently working on for the current month as well. So if you are a customer, even if you're not a customer and you see like a feature that you want to get implemented, go ahead and submit an idea over on ideas.patchmypc.com. And you can just kind of track as we look into those feedbacks and as they get implemented, kind of what that looks like and how we innovate based on that partnership with our customers. So definitely a great place to get some feedback in if you do have any ways that we can make the product better. Yeah, so I see Brendo had a question. Does the publisher auto update? Yep. So over here, you have the ability to disable it, but every time we perform a sync, we're going to check for new updates. That's actually probably a good thing I should have mentioned is we're usually doing new updates about every 2 weeks. And that's basically to address that customer feedback. So if you go over to our download and docs, we do have a release note feature or release note pop-up. So for example, this one was on November 24th. You can see things like new features. A lot of times for releases, we'll map the features to the user voice from the customer request. So the categories feature of Intune that I showed when we assigned it to Chrome, that was a user voice item, and we can see that on release notes. But yeah, if you check out kind of the history, probably about every 2 weeks is kind of how often we ship on average. So if you enable updates about every 2 weeks, you're going to be getting fixes, features, improvements based on that customer feedback, and it does happen automatically by default.
All right, one more CM or management related question to throw out there. What was the first Windows OS that you managed in an environment professionally? .3.0, wow. 3.1 and T4. That is awesome. Quite a few XPs coming in through here too. A lot of 95. Slackware. Tops, nice.
All right, so
It's amazing about how everything, like the landscape has just changed over the years with even Windows. Very cool.
So I think we've been at 75 people registered in for probably a couple minutes now. So I think we can probably go ahead and start this if you think it's a good time, Nathan.
Good time, Nathan. Yeah, sure. That sounds great.
So we're going to start. I think we should see something spinning around. I think it updates on your screen as well. So I stole this from Garth, who does the Northwestern user group. It's a pretty easy way to kind of get people to opt in and win something.
I'll have to do that next time we do a giveaway.
All right, Steve Swaney. So if you could email me, justin@patchmypc.com, we'll be able to get like a virtual card sent over to you. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you all for entering. I think that's all I have. Anything else from me, Nathan, before David starts?
No, I don't think so. Again, yeah, thank you so much. Congrats, Steve. Reach out to Justin, and Justin, I'm assuming you and your team will hang around a little bit to watch chat for any more questions that might pop in.
Yeah, anything that comes on chat, we'll be here.
All right. Well, I think we are ready. David, are you good to go? Your team ready?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.